Well, good afternoon to you. 3:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today, this hour, Chuck DeVore joins us from the Texas Public Policy Foundation. We'll talk about Tony Blinken's visit to the Middle East. How did that go? Not well. Not well at all. Chuck DeVore will break that down. Kyle Seraphin is with us, the former FBI agent and the host of the Kyle Seraphin Show. At 4 o'clock, we'll get into the latest on the Tranifesto, just out. Pieces of the Tranifesto now going public of the Nashville shooter. And, of course, it says kind of what you expected it would. And then Tom Bevan is here at 5 o'clock from Real Clear Politics as we get into Joe Biden's no good, very bad, awful polling numbers. New low Joe. Yet again, you can join us today, 888-630-9625. 888-630-WMAL.
Now, part of the challenge for Mr. Biden here is that people are simply pretty pessimistic at the moment. 73% said that things are just going badly in America right now, and that's up from 65% at the start of the year. So voters just don't feel great about where things stand right now.
Yeah, that's CBS. 73% of Americans say things are going badly in America today. When was the last time we received 73% support for anything? Right? 73% of Americans say things are going very badly right now. And guess who they blame? They blame Biden. It's Biden's fault. The big New York Times poll this weekend finds that Donald Trump is beating Joe Biden in 5 out of 6 very important swing states. Trump is up over Biden 47 to 43% collectively in Arizona, Michigan, Georgia, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Trump was ahead in all of the battleground states except for Michigan, where he was tied with Biden, and Nevada, which favored Biden by 3 points. Sorry, that was a Bloomberg News and Morning Consult poll that just came out with that data. Voters polled in Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Michigan all prefer Trump over Biden at a margin of 3 to 10 points. Wisconsin is the exception in the New York Times survey. So here you have Trump dominating Biden in swing state after swing state after swing state, to the point that if the election were held today, based on the New York Times data, Donald Trump wouldn't have the minimum 270 he would need. He would, of course, have that. He would have 300 electoral votes. 300 electoral votes. He would easily win the election if it were held today, if these numbers held up. Isn't that fascinating? The headline on the New York Times piece is Trump leads in 5 critical states as voters blast Biden, Times Sienna poll finds. And inside the survey, the left is marveling at all of the specifics here in terms of the demographics. They can't believe what I'm about to read you. They say discontent pulsates through the Times poll, with a majority of voters saying Mr. Biden's policies have personally hurt them. The survey also reveals the extent to which the multiracial and multi-generational coalition that elected Mr. Biden is fraying. Demographic groups that backed Mr. Biden by landslide margins in 2020 are now far more closely contested, as 2/3 of the electorate sees the country moving in the wrong direction. Voters under 30, these are young voters, favor Mr. Biden by 1 percentage point. Just 1. When does that happen? The Democrat only has a 1-point advantage over Trump? Among voters under 30. His lead among Hispanic voters is now down to single digits. That's a coin toss, ladies and gentlemen, among Hispanic voters. Single-digit lead for Joe Biden, and his advantage in urban areas is half of Mr. Trump's edge in rural regions. In other words, Trump is doing very well outside of the urban areas, and he's doing pretty good in the urban areas, so much so that he's cut into Biden's numbers pretty dramatically. And while women still favored Mr. Biden, men preferred Mr. Trump by twice as large a margin, reversing the gender advantage that had fueled so many Democratic gains in recent years. Yeah, men are very much on Donald Trump's side, very much on his side here. And the women, not so much, but Biden only has a slight advantage there. Isn't that fascinating? It used to be, at least in previous years, women were determinative. here because they had such a dramatic Democrat preference. Men were more split on the question. Now they're all for Trump. Let's see here. Thinking about the upcoming presidential election in 2024, if the election were held today, who would you vote for if the candidates were Joe Biden, the Democrat, and Donald Trump, the Republican? Among Joe Biden supporters, 50% of women say they're for Biden. 42% of women say they're for Trump. The rest are giving other options. They're for another candidate, or they won't vote, or they don't know. So 50% for Biden, 42% for Trump. Among men, 55% for Trump, 37% for Joe Biden. So those are the numbers among men and women. It's interesting also to look at the demographic breakdown by race and ethnicity. Among white people, 54% Trump, 39% Biden. Among black people, 71% Biden, 22% Trump. That's a huge number. That's a huge number for a Republican candidate these days. 22% of black voters in this swing state survey say they're with Donald Trump. Hispanic voters, 50% are with Joe Biden, 42% with Trump. That's a massive sea change in the direction of the Republican. Let's see. College graduates, 52% Biden, 38% Trump. If you are not a college graduate, you're with Trump. 54%. Non-college graduates are with Trump. 54%. Just 39% for Joe Biden. That's fascinating. Among income levels, if you're under $50,000, it's a dead heat. 46% both to Trump and Biden. They're evenly split here. From $50,000 to $100,000, Donald Trump has a 2-point edge here, 48 to 46. And if you're over $100,000, Trump now has the edge on that number. He has a 6-point edge, 49 to 43. So Trump is either tied or ahead in every income category now over Biden. So those are the survey results. A couple of other interesting things that stand out here in the crosstabs, which I was digging through this weekend. Trump beats Kamala Harris 47 to 44 if the election were held today. 47 to 44. That's in other words, Kamala has a slight advantage over Biden, if you can believe that, as a candidate. But 47-44 for Kamala. Only 6% of Democrats in this survey say that the economy is excellent. Let me repeat that. Just 6% of Democrats think the economy is excellent. Holy crap. 18% of 2020 Biden voters, 18% of them, people who voted for Joe Biden in 2020, trust Trump now more on the economy. The economy really is the whole ballgame, by the way. The whole summary of this, if I could pick the one thing that really stands out to everyone, it's that where the clearest delineating factors are, it's the economy. It's the economy. It's the James Carville line. It's the economy, stupid. It's the economy. Are there other areas that I care a whole lot about that not every other American does? Yeah, for sure. Abortion's a good example of that. Democrats have really strong views on abortion. They think that abortion should be legal at all times for any reason, no matter what. That's what Democrats think. Republicans, they're muddled. They're all kind of split up. Some think it's fine to have abortions all the way through a pregnancy. Some think it's fine to have some restrictions. That's what they would prefer. Some think that it would be good to have a lot of restrictions on abortion, and some think that there should be no abortion at all. But Republicans are a little more muddled on that question, which is why Democrats really want to exploit it. At the electoral level, they want to run on this because they know their voters are super activated by it. Republicans kind of split up. They kind of split up. They kind of they're kind of all across the board on the issue of abortion. But the economy, it's crystal clear. It is crystal clear what's going on. Nobody's buying Bidenomics. They don't think that that's good for them. NBC has a report this weekend. They call it a jumbled mess. They say the Bidenomics brand is leaving nearly everyone, including Biden, baffled. They say no one seems to like Bidenomics, the eponymous shorthand for Joe Biden's economic policies. Not voters, not Democratic officials, not even at times the president himself. It's a term that mystifies Americans and confounds even its namesake. I don't know what the hell that is, Biden said in a speech in Philadelphia earlier this year. In a September focus group with Pennsylvania swing voters, one participant told the research firm Engageus that the concept was, quote, a jumbled mess, adding that it's really hard to explain. Yeah, but reality, the economy sucks. They keep saying that inflation is, quote, coming down. And what that really means is prices are still going up, but at a slower level. So if prices are going up, what are Americans going to think about that? Well, it sucks. They're not for it. They can't afford it. They can't afford it at all. You've got 2/3 of the country living paycheck to paycheck right now. You have $1 trillion, over $1 trillion in credit card debt. You have interest rates on that debt that are going up every week. You have mortgage rates that are going up like crazy, such that there's a lot of people who've just made a decision against buying a home right now, because the amount of home that they could afford has gone down dramatically thanks to Joe Biden and his policies. So Bidenomics is a stinker. And I'm hoping they keep running on the economy, that is the left. But I don't know. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they have a very evil plan that they're going to try and mobilize coming up in the next year. Because what are their options? They don't have an issue they can run on. If just 6% of Democrats think that the economy is in good condition, they have a really bad message right now. Here's the coverage over on ABC of this New York Times poll. George Stephanopoulos speaking with Jonathan Karl, longtime White House correspondent for them.
Biden in 5 of the 6 key battleground states, including some rather large leads in Nevada and Arizona.
Yeah, and it's not an outlier. We've seen similar polls like this that show in that hypothetical matchup, which doesn't seem all that hypothetical anymore, of Biden versus Trump. It shows that he can actually win and is leading in these battleground states. But, George, I have to tell you, one thing to consider here is, Trump has been in the news over the last year or so based on these criminal cases, the civil case in New York. But people have not been paying attention to what Trump has become. Trump, since he left the White House, and this is really the theme of my book, has become...
Listen to the condescension. People have not been paying attention to what Trump has become. If they only knew how bad this man is, they wouldn't support him. How is Joe Biden losing to Trump? Jonathan Karl asks in his desperation.
Has become. Trump, since he left the White House, and this is really the theme of my book, has become more detached from reality than he ever was even in the White House. If you think of where we were in January of 2021, that's the starting point for where a Trump presidency would be next time around. So I think he's had largely, believe it or not, a free ride. Again, the criminal cases we know about. But what he's thinking, what he's doing. He had a speech just the other day in Texas where he referred...
He has the entirety of the Democrat-run justice apparatus trying to destroy him right now. What free ride? Can you imagine that free ride? Would you like a ride like that? What is he talking? Trump is in court today fighting with lunatic Democrat prosecutors and judges. And all of these cases have been dropped specifically to meddle in the election. Would Jonathan Karl be able to withstand that onslaught? That's a free ride?
Trump presidency would be next time around. So I think he's had largely, believe it or not, a free ride. Again, the criminal cases we know about. But what he's thinking, what he's doing. He had a speech just the other day in Texas where he referred to the people that are in prison because they attacked the U.S. Capitol and beat up police officers. He called them not prisoners, but hostages. We talk about Biden's age a lot. Biden's negatives are on top.
January 6 people. You know what's also funny here is listen to him talk about this? Isn't the media amazing? Aren't the media amazing? So what is their position on Trump speeches? Do they air Trump speeches or not? They don't. They refuse to. They used to air Trump speeches, remember? And then they said, oops, we got him elected by airing Trump speeches. We're no longer going to do that. So now whenever he gives a rally, whenever he gives a speech, they refuse to air it. And to the extent that you see it at all on any of their networks, they'll clip it up, they'll run it through a distortion filter, and they'll display it on your screen. That's the way they handle Trump speeches. Now Jonathan Karl is saying that nobody gets to hear from him enough, so they don't really recognize his state of mind. Wait, so what are you saying? So should we be airing the speeches or not airing the speeches? He's saying now that if only people could actually hear what he was saying on these stages. Well, we could if you'd air them. ABC. He's so crazy. He thinks that there were people who were treated incorrectly in the wake of January 6th, that you have American citizens who are being held as hostages, who are being persecuted. Who could even think that way, says Jonathan Karl. And the answer to that question is lots of normal people. All they want to see is justice meted out in a civilized, decent, equitable way, in the way that we used to use the word equitable, meaning equal treatment under the law. That's what we're looking for. You punch a cop, you should probably do some time for that. You stand around inside the Capitol building as a grandmother waving an American flag, you should probably go ahead and not throw that person in jail. It's kind of obvious what the differences are. And here you have saying Jonathan Karl is upset. He thinks that the American voter is just too ignorant. This is the White House talking point, too. You're just too ignorant to know how good things are. You're just too stupid to know how much better it is under Biden. You're just too dumb to recognize you shouldn't be supporting Donald Trump. You're the problem. When they see these survey results, they don't think to themselves, how do we change? How do we make it so voters like us? How do we make it so voters like our agenda? What can we do to deliver for them? How can we meaningfully improve their lives? That's not the things that's not what a normal person would think if they saw this reaction. You look at the scoreboard and you say, why am I losing? How do I win? Instead, they're attacking the people. The people are too stupid. That's why these numbers are showing up this way. That's what they really think. And they're saying it in high volume right now. It's 323. You know, these terrible poll numbers for Joe Biden and the Democrats, under normal circumstances in a normal country, you'd look at that and go, okay, that's good news for Republicans. They're polling better. They have a chance of winning the election. The American people have rendered a judgment. That would be the normal assessment. But here's the problem. They're like an animal backed into a corner here, and they're going to do something radical. That is the left, these Democrats, whether it's replacing Joe Biden at the last second or further demonizing their fellow Americans to the point of something very, very dangerous in this country. We'll keep tracking that issue. Ahead, Chuck DeVore joins us. We'll talk about Tony Blinken's trip to the Middle East. Good afternoon to you. It is 3:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up 4 o'clock, Kyle Seraphin is here. The former FBI agent will react to the breaking news today, some of the details of the Tranifesto in Nashville being released. And then Tom Bevan is here from Real Clear Politics at 5 o'clock to discuss new polling showing Trump easily defeating Joe Biden in most of the swing states if the election were held today. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The Biden administration has been pushing for pauses in Israel's defense of itself against the terror group Hamas. They say they'd like these pauses to be able to give time for Hamas to get the hostages out. Tony Blinken just did a tour of the Middle East, and the Associated Press says that he received tepid, if any, support for pauses in Gaza fighting. For more details on what this all means, let's bring in Chuck DeVore. He's a retired Army intel officer, the vice president of national initiatives at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and the author of Crisis of the House Never United. Chuck, good to have you back with us, sir. Thank you.
Great to be with you again. I wish it was under better circumstances.
For sure. So Tony Blinken goes on a Middle East tour, and he didn't get a very warm reception. What do you make of this trip and what he set out to do?
Well, I mean, first of all, the Middle East loves a strong horse. And what's happening with the Biden administration is they've returned to this, frankly, hard to explain policy of tilting toward the Islamic Republic of Iran and its mullahs in this vain attempt to try to get it to abandon its nuclear program. And what they've done in sacrificing a lot of progress made in the previous administration under Donald Trump is they've scared a lot of the Sunni majority Arab states that are fearful of Iran and its effort to create essentially a Shia hegemony over the region. And that's, I think, what's going on here with Iran's support of these various proxies with Hezbollah in Lebanon, with Hamas in Gaza, with the Houthi rebels down in Yemen, and the fact that the American side is only looking at this purely as an Israel versus Hamas conflict, while avoiding really the big picture, which is Iran's culpability in this whole affair.
You know, what I'm confused about is what is exactly the Biden administration asking Israel to do here? They keep asking for pauses to the fighting in Gaza, but my impression is that Israel is going to do everything it can to protect the safe passage of hostages. I don't think they need U.S. requests to do that, do they?
Well, I mean, I think what the Biden administration is trying to do is split the difference. And they're splitting the difference both for a domestic audience. The modern Democratic Party is severely split on the issue of Israel and its right to exist, as well as an international audience, because of the fact that the Arab nations are so unnerved by the Biden administration's return to this Obama-era policy that favors Iran. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to look somewhat palpable to the Arab capitals in the region, as well as to their own base. I mean, you have this discussion later on in your show about how Trump is now beating Biden in most of the swing states. Well, a lot of that is due to the significant erosion of Biden's support among Democrats over his Israel policy. So they're hoping that by pressuring Israel to have these so-called humanitarian pauses, that they can somehow rescue some of their base. Now, the fact of the matter is this is not helpful to Israel in its military operation, because any pauses are going to give Hamas the ability to try to resupply some of their forces, to try to reposition some of their fighters, and to get a quick break in this justifiably unremittent attack by Israel, trying to completely annihilate Hamas. And so any pauses do not help the Israeli side.
What is the likeliness that any aid that the Biden administration sends into Gaza will be seized by Hamas? We're looking at big numbers here. We've got a $100 million aid package that Biden announced recently, split between Gaza and the West Bank. Additionally, inside of the $100 billion request that Biden just made to Congress, he's asking for $9.5 billion for humanitarian relief in Gaza. What is the likeliness that Hamas takes control of all of that?
Well, Hamas is the government of Gaza. And so unless the individual Gazan people loot the supplies and basically take them themselves, then significant portions of any material that get into Gaza is going to be, if it's useful to Hamas, is going to be used by Hamas, whether to reprovision their fighters, to sell, because they do a lot of their own selling of aid, as well as they'll extort people who have anything of value, call it a tax, and take some of it. Yes, anything that goes in there is subject to being expropriated by Hamas, even in normal times, right, and especially so during a war.
And it would help power the terrorism war machine there in Gaza, because what they're using these resources for includes, powering their missiles. They're using the fuel to fire these rockets. And they're also using, for instance, the cement to build the tunnel system that they used to underneath of Gaza.
Huge amounts of Western aid have been diverted into making weapons of war. I mean, it's very important for people to understand when they go off protesting about, Gaza is an open-air prison, and, the occupation. Israel hasn't had any sort of role in the management, the administration of Gaza since when? 2005, 2006? Mm-hmm. So we're looking at something like 17 or 18 years that the Gaza area has been, not administered by Israel. And people seem to forget that there was one election in 2006. Hamas won that election, and shortly after that, they literally threw the Palestinian Authority rivals off of high buildings. They murdered them, and of course haven't had an election since. So one election and you're done, I guess, under the Hamas system.
Let's talk about other ways the United States is involved here. I see here a report from the Washington Free Beacon today. Headline: Scoop: Biden demands gun control for Israelis. Adam Credo's on the byline here, and he says that the Biden administration refused to sell American weapons to Israel, unless it provided guarantees that the guns would not be given to civilians living in the West Bank. The Washington Free Beacon is reporting the Jewish state urgently requested the United States sell it thousands of M16 rifles following the terror attack on October 7th, a slaughter of more than 1,400 unarmed Israeli citizens. But the Biden administration would not approve the sale until Israel guaranteed the critical weapons would not reach civilian outposts in the West Bank, which the Biden administration and its Democratic allies view as occupied territory. So, Chuck, look, the Free Beacon, excellent reporting here, pointing out that on October 7th, when all of those Israelis were slaughtered, almost all of them didn't have a firearm. They didn't have any way to fight back against the terrorists who paraglided across the border. Why is the Biden administration making it a condition of aid that civilians not have weapons to defend themselves?
Well, again, this goes to two different things with the Biden administration. Number one, of course, their inherent distaste or opposition to civilians of any kind being able to exercise the natural right to self-defense. And in this, of course, Israel is a little closer to nations around the world, more so than to us. And shortly after the massacre occurred, you had Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu suggesting that the Knesset revisit some of its policies about gun ownership because, as you point out, virtually none of the civilians that were contiguous with the areas around Gaza were armed and able to defend themselves. I mean, when I was reading the horrific aftermath that occurred, these stories that came out about the civilians being slaughtered, I wondered to myself, what would have happened had this taken place in Texas, where more than half of the households are armed? And a lot of people would have died, but eventually you would have run out of terrorists because they would have been killed breaking and entering into different homes in much higher proportions than they were in the operation, that resulted in the massacre, the greatest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust. And so that's the one thing, is this opposition to this concept of self-defense. The other, of course, is the continuation of this policy from this administration of trying to appease the Arab street, trying to appease Sunni Arab opinion, which is difficult to appease when you're not doing the right thing against Iran. What you saw with the previous administration was the amazing success of the Abraham Accords, where you had a number of Arab Sunni countries make peace with Israel, something that would have been unheard of, especially after the U.S. moved its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Everyone said that would be impossible after doing such a thing. So instead, of course, what you saw was this amazing renaissance of diplomatic relations with Israel and much of the Arab world.
Do you believe the Biden administration is destroying the Abraham Accords?
Well, absolutely they are, because it runs completely contrary to very deep-rooted beliefs and conventional wisdom within the State Department and within the conventional diplomatic foreign policy community of America. In fact, at the onset of it, you heard an enormous amount of ridicule heaped on the concept, and specifically on Jared Kushner, as supposedly this amateur who didn't know what the hell he was doing. And then, of course, we end up with this amazing result, which is perhaps what happens when you think outside of the box and you have a significant amount of presidential authority being pushed to try to make it happen. All of these things are being undone, much to the detriment of regional security, to American national security interests, and frankly, the interests of countries like Jordan and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and some of these other areas, these other countries that are looking at the threat from Iran and trying to decide, do we accommodate it? Do we end up, for example, developing our own nuclear weapons program, which has been hinted at in Saudi Arabia? Do we drift away from the United States out of self-protection because we don't want to be targeted by Iran? This administration caused a lot of this catastrophe that you're seeing, and we're focused on the wrong thing. We keep focusing on Iran's proxies. The proxies, the Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, are the symptoms of the disease. The disease is Iran and Iran's Shia hegemony that they're trying to create.
Let's talk about the way they're expressing that. There's new information out from the Biden administration now. The Pentagon say that the number of confirmed attacks on U.S. troops in the Middle East skyrocketed over the weekend. The Biden administration responding with a display of military force in the region. In a rare move, U.S. Central Command announced the arrival of a nuclear-powered Ohio-class submarine to the region Sunday. The total now of attacks on U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria are at 38, according to the Pentagon press secretary, Brigadier General Pat Ryder, confirming that today, according to Politico. Now 38 attacks. At least 46 service members have reported at least minor injuries from the October 17th and 18th attacks. The Pentagon said on October 25th that at least 21 personnel sustained minor injuries during drone attacks in Iraq and in Syria. So we're looking at a mounting number of attacks here on U.S. troops. It's a lot, including a bunch of injuries in the process here, Chuck DeVore.
Right. The Biden administration's policies, let me be very clear, will lead to the deaths of American service members in the region, because what they are doing through their incremental response to Iranian-sponsored aggression is they are responding on terms that Iran is perfectly comfortable with. Iran is perfectly willing to fight to the last Houthi rebel, to the last Hamas terrorist, to the last Hezbollah militiaman, because all we are doing is responding in kind. Instead, what we need to do is go to the source. We need to threaten Iran itself. And the best way to do that is you play to the U.S. Navy's strengths, and you go after Iranian military naval assets, you go after Iranian oil exports, you do things where we have clear supremacy, a clear ability to inflict pain way above the ability of the Iranians to respond. And only then can you get them to climb down. We did something like that in 1988. I had a modest role in the operation known then as Operation Praying Mantis. It was, at the time, the largest U.S. Navy surface action since World War II, and it was in response to Iran laying sea mines in international waters during the tanker war between Iran and Iraq, the Iran-Iraq tanker war. And the U.S. Navy started to escort some reflagged Kuwaiti tankers. They were crewed by U.S. crews and captains. They had U.S. Navy escort, and the Iranians didn't like that. They tried to attack it with naval mines, and we responded very aggressively. And after we did, the tanker war soon ended, and Iran behaved itself for a decent period of time. So I think the lesson is very clear. You go after the source. You don't allow the Iranians to respond at a time and place of their choosing, which is what's happening now and will, mark my words, lead to the deaths of American service members.
All right. Chuck DeVore with the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Thank you, sir, for your time today. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Just moments ago, Donald Trump stepped out after testifying in that phony baloney New York civil fraud trial. Here are his remarks to the media. A lot of drama, apparently, inside that courtroom today.
I think it went very well. I think you were there and you listened and you see what a scam this is. This is a case that should have never been brought. It's a case that should be dismissed immediately. The fraud was on behalf of the court. The court was the fraudster in this case. They made references to assets that were...
Oh, man, did not go well in that room, did it? The court, he says, is the fraudster in this case.
Very valuable, and they said they had no idea. They had no idea what the numbers were when they said $18 million for Mar-a-Lago, and it's 50 to 100 times that amount by any estimation.
Remember, the foundation of this case, Letitia James, the deranged New York Attorney General Democrat, alleges that Donald Trump defrauded banks when he secured loans from them. No bank has made such an allegation. In fact, Donald Trump paid those loans back on time.
It's a terrible thing that's happened here. We're taking days and days and weeks, and It goes on, and then you look at the outside world and what's happened. But of course, they're getting the wish because I don't have to be here for the most part, but I sort of do have to be here because I want to be here because it's a scam. And
it's a scam, he says. All right, more updates on that trial today. It got very testy in that courtroom. Judge Engeron wasn't letting Donald Trump even defend himself. He was attacking Trump's lawyers because that's how the justice system works now in America. Coming up, Kyle Seraphin will be with us just minutes from now. We have brand new information on the Tranifesto of the woman behind that massacre in Nashville. Kyle Seraphin will break it down with us coming up.